Here on a cool and breezy May morning in London, in a garden, I can predict two things with confidence. One is that over the next 5 minutes I'm going to share with you an idea that you might find quite interesting and a bit different. And the second one is that I'm going to get interrupted by a cat. Let's see if both come true. The attempt I'm going to make is to introduce you to a word, quite a long word, called restrainability. And I'm going to put that alongside a word that may be more familiar to you, which is sustainability. And literally just in a few seconds, the starting point for that is going to be that sustainability has become increasingly important in the industrialized world, and that more and more evidence has suggested that our current economic and industrial, agricultural and other systems are unsustainable. We have a problem of climate change, we have a problem with sea level rises. We set ourselves a target that was agreed in places like Paris, that we needed to hold global temperatures at 1.5 degrees in terms of rises, and we've already missed that target. And we don't know for sure what's going to happen if that temperature is 2 degrees, 3 degrees, but most scientifically based predictions, and there are literally thousands of reports already pointing to sea level rises that are leading to flooding of land in small island states, and that coastal regions are going to be threatened, that the climate itself, climate change, could become extremely destructive for the world in terms of our seas, in terms of drought, in terms of flooding, in terms therefore of the viability of agriculture that feeds the world, that all of those things together are leading to the use of the word sustainability increasingly being associated with our current systems not only being unsustainable, but setting up a future for our children and grandchildren that could border on disastrous. So we've got a kind of word sustainability linked more and more to the fact that what we're doing is unsustainable, and it may even be too late to hit the targets that we wanted to, and now it's going to be about damage limitation. Now let me park that for a moment and introduce the word restrainability. And that word, and I was part of writing an article about this about a year ago, often will arrive at the practices of indigenous people around the world who have had to live with nature to survive for literally thousands, if not tens of thousands of years. And their approach to living and life and nature, I think, matches the definition that I'm going to share with you in a moment of they have a restrainability based approach to life. And if unsustainability sounds quite a negative thing, restrainability might sound like that too, but actually when you look into it, it's not. Sustainability and unsustainability is the line now that if we don't sustain our planet, it's going to die. And we could end up in an real apocalyptic place with that there are certain potential tipping points. And at one point you may remember, and it's still mentioned, about holes in the ozone layer which protects us from sunlight that becomes toxic to us unless that natural film of protection around the world is maintained. And that when there are big holes, that can create big problems on our land. And so we know that there are certain behaviours and practices that are not going to be good for us and for our kids and grandkids. And we will label our current practices, which can be everything from the overuse of fossil fuels to the way we might be dumping chemicals into our rivers, that temperature rises melt the ice cap, which can lead to all kinds of impact on our seas and so on, that we label those as unsustainable. And so sustainability becomes a movement to engage in practices that help sustain and repair our planet. The only difficulty with unsustainability, and that links to studies about how human beings are in their behaviour, is that unsustainability is a negatively framed thing, and it's hard sometimes to get positively motivated around it unless we're in a place of protest, unless we're in a place of self-criticism. And I'm not arguing against those things, but when we're looking to get kind of global change, when we're trying to get changes that are going to improve the current potentially disastrous situation, framing things in terms of negativity can, just like if you're parenting children and you only give them negative criticism, that you frame your own life as having to cut down, stop doing things, being in a place of criticism that what I'm doing is somehow bad, is that can depress, and that can lead to lower levels of contribution, lower levels of motivation, because we're on a line that in kind of common language is putting us on a downer. Now, some people watching this might be quite angered by the fact that given the current state of the planet that many of us have created, that we should be moaning about why you're putting us on a downer. But I'm being very pragmatic here and just looking at the impact of trying to get initiatives going in our streets, in our towns, in societies, organisations and industries, that it can be hard to get sustained commitment when the narrative is one that's too negative, that is around unsustainability. But I'm honouring and respecting all of those efforts and not questioning that we shouldn't be doing them. But I'm arguing for the use of another word, and actually a transition to it as one of our main approaches to creating a sustainable world as quickly as we can. And that's the word restrainability. And coming back again to when we humbly and respectfully observe cultures that have managed to survive, even with our interference in terms of kind of plundering resources in some of those countries, is where they have survived. It's by doing what they have done in very wise ways for a very long period of time. And that is not to be in constant states of cutting down use, but it's to be in constant state of only using what's needed and experiencing that as the most natural thing to do. And so when we take a little jug of milk in a cafe and notice that we tend to overfill it and then pour stuff away, these are cultures that, because of their stewardship of the resources around them to help them to survive and even thrive, is they don't overfill and pour away, is they fill up to the level that's just what they need. They only take from nature what is needed. They do not take more than is needed and watch it go out of date, be needed to be wasted. It's a very generalism in terms of what I'm saying here, but certainly that is where, when we wrote a paper collaboratively around this, that was the starting point. That restrainability might seem to be a negative word too, about holding back, but actually it can be experienced as the most positive thing in the world, because it creates space for others, it creates space, it creates potential. And in a simple example, if I'm in a conversation and I don't speak too much, but I listen, and I enjoy listening, and I let others speak, and I look to say only what is needed rather than just keep speaking whatever's in my head, the quality of that conversation can go right up, and I can experience it in a much more satisfying way, because I only speak the necessary rather than try and keep modifying all the words that I'm saying, perhaps a bit like in this little recorded talk. But part of my own development has been to actually slow down and to create space and silence. A second example simply is that when we go shopping and experience this positively, and we are privileged to be able to do this, for example, in the UK, is I don't overshop. I don't end up throwing stuff out the cupboard that's way beyond its sell-by date. But that's not experienced as an I don't do. It's an experienced as I do. And what happens is I go out and think, what do I need for today or the next few days? And I very mindfully fill up from empty rather than overfill and then have to throw stuff away. Restrainability is the ability to do, to say, to think, to be just what is needed. If it's a graphic equalizer on a sound system and I'm playing some music, I don't whack the volume up and then take it down having flinched at the high volume. Is I start at silent and slowly take the sound up until it feels just right. Practicing restrainability is a strong positive action because we fill up to the level that's needed rather than overfill and then take down to the level that's needed, having created waste. And that can be everything from what we purchase, what we use to make something, to literally how we simply dialogue in the world. We can overthink, or we can simply sit in silence and allow the thoughts to arise, and we realize that out of those thoughts arising is just what we need. So restrainability is a practice that is good for the planet simply because we see ourselves as the stewards of what's there, and we take no more than what's needed and experience that as a positive action. And it can feel almost impossible at the start to do that because we are so groomed to overconsume, and it's not something that comes easy if we've been used to abundance, and we've been used to often being groomed by large corporations that sell us in the retail sector to buy 3 for 2, to get 2 for 1, to fill up so we don't run out. It's a very different change when you don't have many resources, if any, and you've been forced by circumstance to only be able to afford what you need. And in a world of overabundance, that can feel like somehow you're poorer than everybody else. But actually, when we look at a cupboard where we have to throw most of it away because it's gone by its use-by date, I'm not sure we feel very rich at all. And most people throw away what they've wasted with regret, and regret is a negative place to be. So this isn't a dialogue and an invitation to be mean with yourself, but it is an invitation to be genuinely leaner with yourself, but not to experience that on a negative line of cutting down, cutting back. It's to be on a line of starting with the question, what do we need? And you will be observed as holding back to over-consuming, to over-buying. That's just one action that we can take, and it's not to deny that we have to cut back. But if we only go on the negative line of cutting down, of beating ourselves up that we're constantly in a place of greed rather than need, the problem with that is that global action and local action becomes defined by negative action. And it's quite hard to say we have to cut down and experience that positively, where it is easier to start from a place of being naturally restrained. It can feel even celebratory. It can feel very positive and therefore is very motivational.